Hi, this is Paul from Cuddlepot Bootcamp. This week I spoke with Dr. Rebecca English, a researcher in global homeschooling practices, who works with Queensland University of Technology. She gave me her take on the issues surrounding homeschool as well as conventional schooling, and she raised some really interesting points. We'd love to hear your questions and comments, so if you have any, please leave them below.
Just to start with, I'd really like to hear what you think generally about the benefits and drawbacks of homeschooling versus conventional school system. I know it's a big topic, but just if you have any thoughts you'd like to share about that, I think it's good to start with that.
Look, I think the benefits and the drawbacks of home education is an interesting way to start. And I don't know that you can necessarily compare home education just with conventional schooling, because in Australia, as well as in a lot of other parts of the world, home education has some things in common with other alternative approaches to education. And in Japan, for example, it's woven together with a lot of alternative schools where is it hikikomori, the kids that are shut-ins, they tend to be like homeschooled, home educated, but they're registered with a school. In some countries, it's illegal to home educate, but in Australia, we generally think of home education as in opposition to mainstream school, but that isn't the only choice you have.
Yeah.
In home education and schools like a spectrum, you would also have alternative schools, which might provide a better option for some children in certain circumstances. But certainly home education does have benefits and does have drawbacks, and so does mainstream school or any school. So I think the big problem for home education is that it takes an incredible amount of time and effort to home educate a child. Usually one of you has to give up paid work in order to do it, or you have to be able to do paid work that is very flexible. So it works for a certain type of person, or you have to give up money, and that can have impacts in terms of superannuation and retirement. I think the other significant thing with home education is the effort, and it's not evenly distributed across states. So some states make it reasonably easy to home educate. Where I'm here in Queensland, it's very difficult to successfully register and maintain registration for home education. The benefits are myriad. I don't think it should be compared to mainstream school in terms of academic results, but when you look at the research around academic results, home educated students do tend to do much better in terms of ATAR scores here in Australia is what we would call them, or in terms of university entrance than, say, children who've been to mainstream schools. When you look at children of colour and disadvantaged kids in the US, those kids do much, much better when they're home educated than if they go to a mainstream school, and the performance is out of sight better. There's evidence that they are inappropriately socialised. There's no evidence that they have trouble.
Like in a good way. What do you mean inappropriate? You're smiling as you say.
Yeah,
do you mean inappropriately?
Socialisation is one of those like ticks in the home education community. If you want to make a home educator go, then ask them about socialisation. Socialisation is a funny one. There is no evidence that children have any sort of drawbacks for being home educated in relation to socialising with their peers. So that's a big one, I think. People often identify. They also tend to be more grounded and have better relationships with their families. And some families will cite that they didn't have that teenage thing that, I don't know what you were like, but I was certainly very much, rebellious in my teens and got away with everything by the skin of my teeth. And I don't want my children to be in that situation. So I would be devastated if I thought they were doing half the stuff I was doing. And I think a lot of the home education families that I've spoken to will tell you that they don't have those problems.
Yep.
Children.
Yeah, okay. Wow. So there's a lot to think about there. I asked for it. I asked for a general statement. So there you go. So yes, you said it's really a false dichotomy between your conventional system and homeschooling. There's democratic schools and there's unschooling.
Those two would have.
I'm touched. Yeah.
That's
so
okay.
that you can have.
May have some commonalities with unschooling, although all schools in Australia have to teach the national curriculum. So it's not. We can't unschool like a Sudbury Valley school in the US or like Summerhill in the UK.
That's right. Yeah.
We have to follow the national curriculum. All state requirements state that you have to.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking that in. So.
I assume that there is like a homogenous home education community, which I don't think exists. Home education I sort of see as a spectrum with sort of a radical unschooling at one end and very strict school at home on the other end, akin to distance education. And in between would be all the places where everyone would sort of sit in various families.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a permanent position either. I think, what you do maybe with your 4-year-old will be really different from what you do with your 13-year-old or your 16-year-old, and all of these things would shift and change as your relationship as a family evolves and your relationship as a family with home education evolves.
Yeah. Okay, I get that. So I just want to focus, just zero in on socialization. Okay. Yeah, sure. So major topic that comes up, you mentioned. I know that I think the thing is, like, you've got the thing about homeschooling is you've got the random. Like, it's so random, you don't know what the parents are like and what they're going to do. But just to talk about what they can do, if your parents are really on point, they can go to clubs, classes, and then there's all kinds of activities they can do. But do those things really compare to like an everyday institutional setting where kids can go to and they've got the same people that they meet, and then like it's that a structured environment? Does it really compare to that in terms of social development? I know that you mentioned, obviously you just mentioned that they actually do well, right? Yeah. But on the face of it, do you have anything to add?
When you talk,
I'm not sure that I asked anything there original.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, this is a question. So you've got the clubs and stuff. That's something you can do. But then again, you've got that thing, don't you? You've got a place to go to where everyone knows each other, right? Every day, isn't it? So
everyone knows you. Yeah.
What are you losing out when you don't do that? I guess that's the question. What are you losing out?
So when I talk to home educators about socialization, there's a few sort of responses that they have. And the first one, it's quite glib, is that school is such a false idea of socialization. At no other point in your life do you have to spend 6 hours a day trapped in a room doing stuff at somebody else's discretion with people who are roughly 6 months older or younger than you. So there's that. The second point home educators generally make is when we talk about socialization, often in the back of our mind, we're thinking about bullying. And we're thinking that to some extent, it's actually not a bad thing for you to be bullied, right? Like, come on, man, muscle up, what is it, swallow some concrete and harden up. Well, when I think about bullying in the workplace, where I don't spend a day trapped in the building with people who are roughly 6 months older or younger than me, I'm co-supervising with a 73-year-old and I'm 43 in March, and there's lots of different people who have lots of different ages, and I teach students who are all sorts of ages. So there's that. The thing is, if I'm bullied by, say, that 73-year-old or a 27-year-old, doesn't matter who is bullying me, the workplace here has lots of things that they do to stand better. I'm just finishing off some courses here that I have to do my performance review in a couple of weeks. And one of the things I have to do is about bullying. So if I feel like I'm being bullied or someone feels they're being bullied by me, we toddle straight up to HR and go, oi.
Yeah, you talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah. In no other environment are we, as a victim of bullying, told to swallow some concrete and harden up. In every other environment, bullying is seen as something that's really not cool. So my neighbours had a big party the other night. I went over there to quietly tell them to be quiet. It was a Wednesday night. It was 11 o'clock. I had to be at the gym at 7:15. Like, man, I'm tired. I don't want you waking my kids up. So I can handle it that way. Saturday night, the neighbours on the other side thought it was their turn to sort of, put a bomb under our neighbour between us, and they called the police. Now, I think that's going too far, but they felt bullied by the neighbours because they had a quiet chat and said, please turn it down, and they kept going anyway. So if they feel they're being bullied in their home environment, they can go to the police.
Yeah.
Because again, I can go to the union. There's so many options I have. I actually don't have to put up with bullying. Nowhere in my life do I have to put up with bullying. So that's the second about socialization. The third one is, I don't know about what your work relationships are like, but one of my good friends from my workplace has just quit, and I just sent him the meme about thinking I need to make new friends at work, and then that funny face of remembering who I work with. Like, I'm not coming to work to make friends. Why is an expectation that I'm going to school to make friends?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, you don't have many friends from school when you're in my age group. And why would you? We were there by virtue of the fact that we either all lived in the same postcode, or, you know, my parents really liked this particular school that they sent me to. It was an all-girls elite private school, thought it would do me some good. And I'm guessing that most of the other girls who were in my year happened to be there for the same reason.
Yeah.
20 in my year, 210 girls were called Rebecca. Am I supposed to just be friends with them because we're all called Rebecca?
Sorry, how many? How many?
1/10 of my entire cohort was called Rebecca.
1/10. Yeah. We had 7 Bens. We
Yeah.
had 7 Bens, and we had 180 kids in our year, and so there's like 90 boys. So that's almost 10%. That's
Yep.
almost there. Rebecca's and Bens. Yeah. Wonder how many married. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. So, you know, all of these things they're quite arbitrary, really. They're reasons that school is held up. I think the other thing we need to remember is that school's actually a reasonably new institution. We didn't really have schools prior to the Industrial Revolution. Kids had governesses, and certain children would go to places to learn with other children, like boarding schools, but it was only for the very rich. And it was never really for the egalitarian purposes that we talk about schooling today. Schooling really wasn't started for those egalitarian purposes that we now claim for schooling.
Yeah.
It was to do something with kids while their parents worked in factories.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to, what's it called when you design something after the fact? I know there's like retrofitting things, or
reverse engineer it. Yeah.
Reverse engineering. It started out, I heard it started out to get people ready to work in a factory.
Pretty much. And to do for children when it was no longer appropriate for them to go to work, when they were losing fingers and legs and dying and stuff.
Yeah, okay. And so then you have like a right to go to school instead of, you know, a right not to have to work. I guess that might be, and you know, the European prohibition on schooling in Germany, I think it's 100 years old. So it's probably coming from that context. Anyway, this is speculation. But yeah, so like I was just thinking, you know, when you said you only really experience bullying when you have to deal with people you're directly competing with, like that are roughly the same age, like your peers, because they're looking in on you. They're roughly the same age. They're competing with you, and those are the kind of people who are gonna get you. And that's what they're doing in school. They're popping them. They're doing that, aren't they? They're putting the kids into a Shark Tank or something.
Pretty much. And when you read Alfie Cohen and a few other people, they talk about how really school is very competitive. It's designed to have you compete for favors. I mean, there's a bell curve there. There's only a certain number of top ATARs that can be given out. So we're all, you know, gnashing at each other and ripping each other's hair out, fingernails to try and get on top, if that's where we want to go. But that's a very middle class assumption about what we want from schooling as well. Like there are plenty of kids who, certainly I taught in very working class schools where I taught very disadvantaged kids. They weren't interested in getting the top ATAR, and frankly there was no hope in hell of them ever getting it. And for them, I think there was some of those people for whom schooling was really beneficial. And I think again this false dichotomy comes back into play, where we think that it's, you know, either homeschooling is brilliant or home education is brilliant or it's bad, or schooling is brilliant or it's bad, and there's no kind of middle ground. I am very grateful I went to school. I really am.
So am I.
We're not nice people. I had enough time with them as it was, and I couldn't wait to get out and get married at 21 so that I could escape them. And I think really that's part of the issue. I think, you know, for some people home education is right, and some people it just isn't.
Yeah.
The reason we have choice. It's a very, very liberal idea about people should be free to do whatever they want as long as it doesn't impact on the rights of others. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So something you said just really resonated with me. Like, you know, you said it's a middle class assumption about what schools should be like, but it's just I've just been reading some phenomenology about, you know, experience is the way we experience the world is dependent on what we intend to do in our lives and moment to moment, right? So it's just based on your assumptions. What I'm asking you what the drawbacks of homeschooling is versus conventional school, but it's really based on what I want out of school. Obviously, it's for my kids to have the best upbringing academically and socially. I can't think of anything else that I want out of it. So academically, homeschooling is great. And then you've got the social issue, and there's the distorted social environment of school. And then the whole thing of you've got the false dichotomy between conventional school system and the homeschooling and all those different associations in between. You can have part-time democratic schooling, maybe,
so
do
in
your
some,
academic stuff at home.
you can't in Queensland.
Yeah, if you do your academic stuff at home, you could meet privately and just with a group of people, other kids that work out what they want to do together. That sounds like a really rich social atmosphere you could do. I don't know if that's something that's done or not, but why not? That sounds like a good idea.
That's what it always was, when, I don't know how old you are, but I was, a child of the late 1970s and the 1980s. You met your friends in the, in the neighborhood and you hung out and you had these.
I'm 36. I'm 36. Yeah.
A lot younger than me, right? And so, you had these rich worlds that you just lived in the area. I wasn't allowed to, but
if you knew other kids around you, you could say, hey, what are we going to do, guys? Like, and that's it, isn't it?
They're out of suburbs, and he's 50. He very strongly remembers this, like they all had bikes and they would build these huge things. And they found this car once he took us at Christmas, and they were just, all of them taking turns at steering and pushing this car around. And
there you go.
It was a tank. It was all sorts of crazy stuff, this car. It was, it was a race car. It was everything. And these worlds these children built together, well into their pre-teen years and having an amazing time. And that's true creativity, is working with other people to construct a world that isn't real, but you all agree that you're going to build on and create and construct together. Yeah,
that's a massive phase in social, moral development.
Absolutely.
Yeah, massive stage, isn't it? So yeah, I was just going to say, so the world's changed since then, though, right? No one can do that anymore. You got serial killers, you got all kinds of things. Everyone's afraid to go outside. It's not the world where we can roam the streets without supervision, right? That's the point, right? So I'm thinking the idea of a way of stepping around those barriers. You could organise a place to go to and throw your kids in there and see what they do. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
There are places that are doing that. So there's a place in Victoria, rural Victoria, maybe it's rural New South Wales, that's doing that, and they are doing amazing stuff. It's a Letha Learning Centre, and they're doing fantastic stuff with kids who really, because of being on the spectrum or ADHD or other behavioural issues, were basically told not to conventional. They don't fit the box, and they're having really brilliant interactions with an adult who's supervising small numbers of children who work together to create an environment that's suitable for everyone without the pressure of academics and without the pressure of the socializing in the same way. And it's multi-age, and it's a really amazing experiment, and they're having so much success with it.
That's great. That seems like problem solved to me. That's great.
Though I think I was somebody who I'm not very competitive, but I did well at school without very much effort, and it was an escape from my home, so I really was grateful for school.
I know. I really resented sitting there sometimes. I really felt like it was just childcare a lot of the time. And not all the time. I'm not saying anything bad about my teachers. I don't hate you guys. It's all right. But I do remember some definite moments. This is fake. We're not here to learn. This is just a fake system. This isn't right. And that's resentment. That's not good. No. That just breeds all kinds of ill will and badness. So anyway, that's my story. Anyway, hopefully I worked some of that out. So another major topic is screens in schools. I just wanted to get your take on that, like kids using iPads in the classroom instead of books and notepads, and just want to hear what you have to say about that situation.
Oh, screens aren't really my shtick. I just read a thesis, actually. A really interesting researcher named Renee is doing some amazing work with home educators and using Google and searching and looking at the generational digital divide. So she's someone who's interesting to talk to. She works at the University of Tasmania. Otherwise, I think it's something that we all just have to accept as a part of life, in the same way that it's like arguing that we should go back to horses when clearly the car has shut the gate after the horse. Well, it's really bullshit on whether we're going to go back to horses. I don't know necessarily. My personal opinion is that it's just like it's as it is. I think there is advantages to learning how to work with them, not on them, if you know what I mean. Part of the problem is we teach to technology rather than teaching with technology. There's that issue, but otherwise, the horses.
Okay,
So
teaching to so can you just explain that for me? So teaching to technology would be just deferring
computer. This
to the.
You know, we're going to make a stop motion video because that's what I think is cool.
Fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rather than discourses of filmmaking and what are some options that we have? How can we construct different, I don't know, text types with different filmic techniques and analyzing and looking at, say, Ninjago is a great example. I don't know how old your kids are. Mine are old enough to be into Ninjago Lego. And I have an advertising degree as my first degree, and one of the things you learn about is why you advertise to children. And you advertise to children because prior to the age of 8, they have zero understanding that an ad is not actually part of a narrative that they're watching on television. They don't see any difference between the TV show and the ad. So Ninjago takes that one step further. So when we were kids, we had Transformers, which the cartoon was
invented. I had Transformers. Love them.
Invented to sell the product. The product came over from Japan. Hasbro or Mattel, I can't remember who it was, wanted to sell these robots. So they thought a great way to do that is to create a cartoon. So that's why Transformers exists as a cartoon and a story to sell robots from Japan, which were pretty cool. Yeah, pretty much. I'm really sorry. Don't burst your bubble, but that's the reality of that. That's a sort of a thing you can look up. So there's that. But then you look at Ninjago, which takes this idea even further, and it's Lego that has an iPad app with it, but also it's a TV show. So it's like multi-layer marketing in a way. I think what we need to be teaching children is how to interpret an advertisement or a text that looks like a story but is actually trying to flog us a product, and understand why might it be constructed this way, who benefits from its construction, and how can we learn to be cynical so we're not ripped off. And I think technology is a really great way that we can do that kind of work with children. I don't think that's how we're using it though.
Yeah. But what I'm afraid of, I actually have a physical revulsion when I see like a young child with so much enthusiasm on a screen, because I'm just like, it's a cheap thrill, isn't it? It's just such a cheap thrill. You're getting the lights, something like we say to our son, who's 3, by the way, he's our oldest, like when the light on the phone goes on, because we just have phones, we don't have iPads around. When that goes on, the light in your imagination goes out, because you're not creating, you're observing, you're passive, you're not active. And so I mean, it's like they're deadening them, so the capacity to engage in the world is just atrophying, isn't it? To a point, to sure. I mean, like I've loved playing video games, and there is this high response rate engagement you can have, but there's also this addictive quality to it that is just a black hole, isn't it? Like, sure, you've got that stimulation, but it's a black hole in another sense, and you can become completely dependent for your what are they called, like dopamine fixes, you know. Anyway, that's my take. Yeah, I'm just terrified of it. You know, that would be a reason just to keep them out of schools alone if they start doing that. Do you know if they're gonna
Most schools do have a laptop program or an iPad program, and children are encouraged to do work on technology.
Just forget about everything else. Just that seems like a reason to keep them home. Anyway, so and then one other question was, do you know if homeschoolers in Australia are likely to see any subsidization down the track? I think in America you can get like charter schools and where they get resources and they can borrow if they're homeschooling. But do you know about anything like that?
I actually think that subsidization is a very difficult area in the home education community. Some people love the idea of it and some people hate it. Part of the reason why people hate it is because if I accept money from the government, then I admit that I have a relationship with the government that I may not want. So if I'm like home educating for libertarian reasons that I don't want government intruding in my life, I'm already probably not a registered home educator because I don't want to agree with what the government says I have to teach them in relation to the national curriculum, because you do have to do that as a home educator. And if I accept subsidies from the government and money from the government, then I am putting myself in a position where I also, you know, it swings and roundabouts, where the swing might be the money, but the roundabout might be an increased surveillance on me as a home educator, which I may not agree with. the other part of that too, so that might be the libertarian. For the Christians, they would have a very different view of it. Again, they would take that kind of Deuteronomy view where, you should, God grants you the right to look after your kids and to raise them as you see fit.
Sorry, what did you call that view? What was that? I can't hear.
It's in Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy. Okay, from the Old Testament. Okay, yep.
Invokes parents to be, God is the head of the world and father is the head of the household, and you should be able to make choices for that household as you see fit.
Yeah.
Would probably be disinclined to take government money again because they may be, for example, passionate Pentecostals whose view would not align with a lot of what's taught in the national curriculum. So there's those people. In between, I think the bulk of home educators aren't either of those groups, though. I think the bulk of them are people who are refugees from the schooling system.
Okay.
And for those people, they've already been quite hurt or, had quite, negative interactions with education departments. So for them, a lot of them don't register either because really they just want nothing more to do with it. So they're just going to have to take it on themselves. They're already doing enough. To register would be, to have to re-engage with those people. And I think ultimately for them, they wouldn't necessarily take it on either for reasons that they would be forced to engage with, or that's made their lives quite, anxious, maybe, the children's lives. Yeah.
I imagine also, I think I heard somewhere like, people using the conventional system don't like the idea of encouraging people to defect from it as well. I think, is that an issue? Or maybe not, I don't know.
I've had stories of principals pushing the home education application forms across the desk to families and saying, this is the option for you, mate, because we can't help you.
Yeah.
And there is certainly an element of that. But I think, I see the benefit of getting some money from the government, I guess.
Yeah.
In a way. But I also see the drawback that if you take money from somebody, then you are in something, you owe them thing. There's a payment.
That's actually something I did touch on with my thesis. So offers are the same things as threats in terms of they alter the reasons that apply. So it's a form of manipulation. If I offer you something to do something, that if you don't do it, then I'm not going to give it to you, and that's a threat. I'm actually threatening to withhold what I'm offering.
Absolutely, there's balance in that. The board about in relation to the gift. So the gift is never actually an exchange that is free of baggage. There is always symbolic exchange as a physical exchange, and the same. There is a physical exchange of money into my bank account, but there's also a symbolic exchange of my giving up some of my power in order for you to give me that.
Yeah. Well, personally, just speaking for myself, if the government says, "Hey, look, we'll give you free science books" or something like that, I'll be okay with that. That was like all the questions that I've got. You said so many things though. That I just want to run away with. But there's this one idea I came across in my studies. I don't do education, I do moral and political philosophy. And there's this idea, education did come up nevertheless. And the idea was it's parents already have enough influence over the kids and they don't need to have more. And for that reason, some people, such as Michael Clayton, I think it's Justice and Legitimacy in Upbringing, I think his name is, or the book is, and Ben Colburn put me onto this. He's an autonomy theorist. He says that parents already have enough influence, they don't need more, and it's really bad for kids just to have one authority figure or one source of influence. I hope I'm not butchering this. That's why it's really, really bad to have homeschooling. They need to go to an institution to be exposed to these different influences. That was the argument he put to me, if I remember correctly. And I just thought, well, look, homeschooling's still a recourse. It's a legitimate recourse. But that said, I'm kind of thinking, I'm deferring to another point of view, which Chandran Kukatis talks about. His book is called The Liberal Archipelago, which is a play on I think it might be a play on words from the Gulag Archipelago. And his idea is you've got, the state has this monopoly on force. But really what you don't want to have is all your power collected in one institution. You want to have a whole bunch of different spheres of justice, that's another term, and a whole bunch of different influences. And that way they all get a go at shaping the social world. And that's really important. And so by parallel, the idea of having just one school institution would be very similar. It's very similar to the original problem with homeschooling, because you've got that one institution having dominance over you. Sure, you've got different actual teachers, but it's still the same institutional framework. So that's dominating your life. What seems to me to be better is you get your academic studies however you like, but you have a range of associations that you're part of, and that way they all affect your life. I think that seems to be the only consistent thing you can bring out of that. What do you think of that? That's just, you know.
Who are very against home education. Michael Apple springs to mind always. He's very against home education. His and others' argument are that it further removes certain people from the schooling system. So, for example, if you or I, highly educated people, were to home educate our children, we have removed that cultural capital from schools that they might go to.
Yeah.
I live in an upper middle class area here, walking distance to the university, so it's not really going to affect necessarily the area, but it might in a way. I don't know. So there's lots of arguments against it. There is the idea that we should all be sending our kids to state schools, so it's the same argument against, private
It's
schooling.
a common social culture, isn't it?
Yeah. So there is that idea, but I think ultimately they all rely on really neoliberal analyses of home education. And I think home education is far broader than that. And I think the decisions around home education are taken in a very different space than necessarily an economic one. So a lot of the readings against home education that I see are very economically
and public policy too, isn't it? It's not trusting the parents.
It's not really about those day-to-day interactions between parents and children. I take your point about states imposing their will and being a centralized kind of figure in the same way that a parent is. I do think there is a role for the state, though, in managing children. But that said, I don't think not allowing children to be home educated. I know that there are some kids that had issues that were, when I was a teacher, that I missed and my colleagues missed. We didn't necessarily pick up on those. And I think there's lots of issues to it. I do think that it's a complex social problem, but I think it speaks to the difficulties and complexities around social environments in late capitalist, late neoliberal times. And I think, there's a lot of issues in there. I think ultimately, for me, my work rests on this idea that it is legal. It's a right the parents have to educate their children in this country however they see fit. To remove home education from any education statute would also take away the right to private schools, who have enormous.
That's right. A private school of one. That's what homeschooling is, right? Yeah.
So I think there's that element to it, and I think just to look at it in a really neoliberal reading is to miss the nuance of it. And ultimately, I think if you want to give parents the right to choose to home educate, then you have to live with the fact that people are going to do it in ways that you don't necessarily agree with.
Well, I mean, there's expertise for the parents, but there's also expertise for the school, and
and I think there's
the schools.
Skill sets. The parenting and home education is a really different skill set to being a teacher.
But I suppose I want to make the specific point that, to what extent can we trust the schools to do a better job than us? And if you've got legitimate doubts on the school because of the screens, because of bullying, because they've been dulled by institutional blindness, I don't know, then sorry, it's over to us, isn't it? Like,
I think the bulk
what are you going to do?
And meet and have to do within the home education community are what I call accidental home educators. They didn't set out to home educate. They aren't passionate advocates for the pathway, and they end up doing it because they feel they have no choice. So that tells me everything I need to know. I think it doesn't matter necessarily what you think about it or what I think about it. I think what matters is it's gaining in popularity. We've had another 400 children registered in Queensland alone between 2018 and 2019. So it's clearly a growing segment. That's a reasonable sized primary school in increase in numbers, and it's something that we need to be aware of. And I think let's ask what's going on, why, how is this happening? I don't think it's right to put a judgment on it. I think people do the best they can with the information and resources they have in front of them, and if they wind up homeschooling, then that's where the information and resources they have led them.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, like my terror, I seem to have a lot of terror. I was talking about the screens before. My terror is just that, like, if we don't send our kids to school, they're really going to miss out on that thing. I remember going to pre-primary. I call it pre-primary. I don't think I went to kindergarten, although I had daycare before that. And meeting my first friends and being in that setting, and then making friends. I changed schools a couple of times, and that that kind of sucks, changing schools, but at least going and meeting people and stuff, that was a really rich experience. I don't want my children to miss out on that. At the same time, I don't want them to be left down. We've gotten really ahead really early in doing activities with our kids. Our son's only 3 and he's doing all kinds of stuff, and I really feel that if we send him to school, well, he would be bored, but that's not a reason not to teach him now, because he's gaining his engagement in the world and his capabilities, which is going to make him happier, I think, independent to whether he gets a job or not. It's just fun. And I don't want to cheat him on that. I think that's a crime. So, so I don't want that. At the same time, I don't want him to miss out on the stuff. So that's my terror. And I want there to be associations set up where he can go in there and have those experiences. And it seems like that there are homeschooling associations. It seems like that worry might be allayed in our case, where we are. But
it's a terror of every parent, and really it's the economic problem, unlimited wants and limited resources. And I think really that seems to be something you need to reconcile with your partner and your child. And I think treat them like an agent. They know what's to some extent right for them, and we need to.
I kind of think it might be nice just to send them there just to see if he likes it, and just give him a complete choice. Stay home if you want, but just go and have a look.
No doubt, Paul. There you go. You've got your answer.
It's fun. Yeah, I don't know though.
Be prepared for it. If you offer them
if
the
it's
choice.
not good for him, if it's not good for him, why would I give him that choice anyway? Just go.
At the end of the year, I'll be publishing a book on global perspectives on home education in the 21st century with researchers and hopefully some families and children's stories as well. So buy my book.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sure. No worries. Okay. Nice one. That's fine. Yeah.
We're collecting chapters from all around the world. I've got a Mexican chapter. I've got a Malaysian chapter. I've got a US chapter, Canadian chapter. I'm writing a couple of Australian chapters. Yeah. So.
It's like an anthropology of homeschooling.
Yeah, what's going on now?
Yeah, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to me today, Rebecca. We really appreciate it, and we wish you all the best with your publication and in the future.
Cheers. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, no worries.
Bye.